crime numbers down in the city of St. Louis. Say total crime down for February, and number of murders, though, up so far this year. St. Louis Police Chief Dan Isom reports more than 1,700 crimes overall last month, the lowest ever in February that they've tracked. However, 23 homicides so far this year compared to 14 at the same time a year ago. And did you know there is a growing gang problem in the St. Louis area? So let's find out more about it. Dr. Beth Huebner, she is from UMSL, professor of criminology and criminal justice. Beth, welcome to the show. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
I think it amazes a lot of people when they find out that the county has a gang problem. Mm-hmm. Now, when we're talking about gangs in St. Louis County, what are we talking about? Is this the organized gangs that we hear of in other places, or is it a more, just like everything else in St. Louis, more localized?
Everything in St. Louis is localized, I think.
Because we would not accept the gangs from other places,
course.
Right? We got to come up with our own.
The St. Louis way.
Right.
Exactly. So, and actually that can be a problem. So we see more organized gangs in L.A. and New York, and in St. Louis, it's very much based on neighborhood or even block. So we see a lot of small groups of individuals in gangs.
Do we see a lot of tagging by these guys so you know where their areas are, or is that not a thing here in St. Louis?
No, there's definitely tagging in St. Louis. I'm sure if you drive around that you can see it in many different areas of the city. You know, even, like you said, North County, South County, and we even see it here in West County.
What are some of the names that people may not be familiar with of the gangs here, where, you know, you might see a horseshoe and not realize, oh my gosh, that might be gang related.
Right, and you're going to see the same names that you would see in LA. You might see Bloods and Crips, but you would see Bloods and Crips for a certain street name. So they really often use their coordinates as a way to name themselves.
In the newsroom, a lot of times we'll hear about a murder.
Right.
And I don't want to say it's a running joke because it's certainly not funny, but you can pick 6, maybe 10 streets that you could throw out there, and it's most likely on one of those. And I always wonder how much of that is random murders, and how much is a retaliation gang kind of situation. Have you seen any numbers to maybe sum that up?
We definitely see retaliation in St. Louis, and I know the police department keeps data on that, and we know a majority of them are in some way related to retaliation or victimization. In some ways, I don't know exactly, but I would say a majority. And we see those, like you said, centralized in certain areas of the city. Yeah, and those are often the most disadvantaged as well.
Yeah, and there's, 6,000 street names in the city of St. Louis. And on the news, it's the same streets time and time again. And, you know, whether it is territory, you know, that's interesting. What now? Have you talked to some of these gang members to talk about maybe why they form here, access to guns? What have you learned about these guys?
Yes, we've been interviewing juveniles in the lockup as well as adults, but the juvenile interviews have been the most fascinating. So
in what way?
We're interviewing 14-year-old kids, and many of our listeners have children this age, and we asked them, can you get a gun? How long would it take you? And about 50 or 60 of them have access to a gun, and most of them could get it in a couple hours if they didn't have a gun. And what's interesting, we asked them, do you know the penalties for having a gun? And they do. They know better than my students the penalties for having a gun.
So they know. They know the things they're doing are wrong, obviously, and they also know the penalties.
Right, they know the penalties, but what's interesting, we asked them, are you more afraid of the penalties? Are you more afraid of the crime on the street? And they say they're more afraid of the crime on the street. They know that, you know, the odds of them being locked up, it's going to take a while, and they're not as afraid of prison. They're more afraid that someone in the next neighborhood is going to pull out a gun, so they feel like they really need one all the time.
It's a different reality than most of us
very much
have ever experienced. I wouldn't know where to go get a gun. And these guys who are 14 years old live in this environment where, 2 hours, I can get you an illegal gun, boom. And I would imagine the same for drugs. I wouldn't know where to go even look for drugs. And these guys probably know immediately.
Yes, exactly. I mean, particularly, you know, marijuana, that would be something that would be very easy to get, and, you know, a weapon as well.
What else do they say? In addition to the guns, the drugs, what else seems to be a tie here?
Well, you know, mostly this, you know, fear of the street. They're concerned about their future. They don't necessarily understand what sort of avenues are out there for them.
It to me, from what you're saying, doesn't sound like they like. I know it's the posse, the brotherhood. But if they're that concerned about these things, it sounds like they would like a better option if it was there.
Right. They would love a better option. And what's interesting is they're 12 years old, so they really want to become a physician. They really want to do something exciting, but they just don't know how to get there. It's that intermediate step. They're challenged at school. They're not doing as well as they'd like. They're fearful at school, and so they don't really know how to make that leap into adulthood.
And that's sad.
It is sad.
That these kids, what about in the schools? Big problem in the schools, or is it on the streets?
Well, the schools are working hard with this, but a lot of the kids are not going to school, or, they're coming home to it at night. So there's a lot of time that they're not in school. So many schools in North County and in the city are doing gang interventions, but there's a lot of different issues they have to address.
And I know what a lot of people are thinking. We hear these same stories time and time again. Mom's not home. Dad's not around. So the kid falls into the gang. We've been saying this for 50 years.
Right.
And it's not getting any better. As a matter of fact, in some cases, it might be getting worse. In studying this, what do you do or nothing?
No, I definitely think you keep on working at it. And we see that, maybe this generation we work with, but it does pass down. So, we continue to work with younger and younger children, and that's really where we see the intervention can make a difference. Instead of waiting until they're 14, we do something when they're 8 or 6 or 7. So before, I think we were kind of reticent to do something with an older child, but, we continue to try to implement those interventions because they do seem to work for certain groups of people.
This may be a total setup question, but we know these guys are out there driving around.
Right.
Would most people in North County, West County, South County, the city, be shocked to know how much of this is going on? Or is it smaller than what we might think?
That's a good question. I think in some ways it's smaller. We do see crime going down in St. Louis, and that's a good thing. But I do think that most people drive around the areas, where a lot of the gang activity are. They haven't been to certain regions. So even though we see a decline, most people are kind of not knowledgeable about really what's going on.
Let me follow up on you right there. How would you know gang activity? Like if I'm driving down MLK, because that's one was on the show Gangland recently that said that's a divider. MLK is a divider for certain gangs. If I'm driving down MLK, what would I see that would say, hey, don't go over there because that's gang activity? Is there telltale signs?
Sure. Kings Highway, Olive, Martin Luther King, like you said, it's amazing. If you could just drive down those from West County downtown, most people get off, they go around. But if you keep on going all the way down those streets, you're going to see tagging. You're going to see, disadvantage. You're going to see houses that are vacant. You're going to see teddy bears on poles. That's one thing that when I moved to St. Louis surprised me. If you see a teddy bear on a pole, that means someone was murdered there, and so that's kind of like a shrine. So there's many different ways to see that there's violent crime going on in the city.
What about some of the Hispanic gangs? I know Charles Jaco, my colleague here and at Fox, talked about MS-13, about their trying to get a foothold in here. Are they here? Because that's a really violent, is it Central America, South America, really violent Hispanic gang.
Right. And we do see some of that. There is some evidence that they might be moving in. It appears that a lot of it is copycat. We do see a lot of that kids from the city or the county will see those symbols and want to emulate that. There's no evidence that it's a huge foothold yet. But again, it's something important to keep our eyes on.